Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on today's webinar, where we will discuss invoicing trends, obligations, and regulations in Europe. We have great experts on board today with us. Let me start with introducing our guest from KPMG. Agnieszka Smolińska-Wiśnioch is a director in the Indirect Tax Department in KPMG Poland. She is a licensed tax advisor with nearly 20 years of experience in indirect tax advisory. She represents clients during tax audits, tax proceedings, and in front of courts, including the Court of Justice of the European Union. Małgorzata Chociej is a manager in the Indirect Tax Department in KPMG Poland. She graduated from the University of Economics Krakow, Faculty of Economics, and she has over 10 years of experience in tax advisory. On Comarch side, we have Katarzyna Komander, which is a Comarch consultant, responsible mainly for Benelux and French market in the field of EDI and e-invoicing. Katarzyna has graduated Frankfurt School of Finance and Management, and she has graduated as well out of University of Economics in Katowice in Finance and Economics. And last but not least, Rafał Trojanowski, who is an analyst and member of the legal compliance team in Comarch Invoicing BU. He specializes in carrying out data exchange and document management projects in countries where legal policies concerning e-invoicing were introduced. Rafał has graduated of Krakow University, Jagiellonian University in law. Very warm welcome to everybody. And right now, let me briefly go through our agenda. Firstly, we'll go through e-invoicing global trends. After that, we will discuss e-invoicing invoicing in Europe. So we will show you some more information about coming obligations. And at the end, we will talk more about challenges and opportunities connected to invoicing. And 10 minutes before the end of the webinar, we will have a short question and answer session. If we won't manage to answer all questions, we will try to answer them via email. Okay, so I guess we can start with the main presentation.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Today we are going to talk about digital reporting in VAT. And before we start discussing the technical details, let me show you some statistics. Here is a slide where we have the amount of the VAT gap in the EU, according to the recent report prepared by the European Commission. As you can see, the VAT gap amounts to 134 billion euro per year. So this is quite a lot. And as you know, VAT is one of the major sources of the member states' budgets. However, it is, as you can see, very prone to tax frauds. So let's maybe go more into details and see who are the leaders in this field. So we have Italy, we have Germany, we have France, and we have United Kingdom. These are the leaders in VAT leakage in VAT gap. So no wonder that those countries already or are about to introduce mandatory invoicing. Governments are looking for measures to close the VAT gap and prevent the VAT frauds. Many of them is introducing different digital reporting obligations domestically. Of course, this increases the tax compliance burden for the companies. However, e-invoicing is a global trend. It cannot be stopped and we have to adjust to it. So more than 50 countries around the globe already adopted invoicing in B2G or B2B sector. One of the first countries was Mexico. Currently, the trend is spreading across Europe and Asia. It is expected that by 2030, e-invoicing will become a norm, a standard. So currently, the EU is working on its digital reporting requirements under the legislative package called VAT in Digital Age. The European Commission sees a need for a common unified solution in the EU. As these measures need to be adopted at the European level, the changes to the VAT directive are required, and the amendments are expected to come in around November 2020, so quite shortly. Currently, the discussions are held how the e-invoicing system should look like, whether it should be fully harmonized, so invoicing covering intra-community transactions as well as domestic ones, or maybe only partially, so covering only intra-community transactions. What methods of e-invoicing should be adopted, whether go to clearance or real-time reporting, and also the scope. What transactions should be subject to mandatory invoicing? Maybe whether B2G, B2B, or B2C transactions, or maybe this should be implemented in sequences. So let's have a look at different model of invoicing and see their characteristics. Over to you, Gosia.
Thank you, Agnieszka. So as Agnieszka mentioned, the tax authorities worldwide are looking for the solution for the enormous VAT gap that is in place. The global trend that we observe is shifting from so-called post-audit model of the VAT control to so-called clearance model. And what's the difference between those two models? In the post-audit model, the taxpayers are generally free to choose the format of invoice. Of course, there are specific legal requirements that are set out in every country. However, as long as the taxpayer meets these requirements, the format of invoices is free to choose. So after that, the tax authorities gain the visibility over the transaction of the taxpayer in post fact, because the invoices are sent directly to the customer. The tax authorities do not have a view into these invoices. On the contrary, the clearance model, in the clearance model, the taxpayers are obliged to issue invoice in predefined format. And what's most important, they are sending it not directly to the customer, but firstly for the approval of the tax authorities. So thanks to that, the tax authorities gain the visibility over the transaction data of the taxpayers in the real time. This is right now the trend. All the globally, the tax authorities are shifting from post-audit to the clearance model. And of course, there are some hybrids model between these two. One which is worth mentioning is real-time reporting. This model is adopted, for example, in Hungary. So under this model, the taxpayers are still able to send invoices to the customer directly. However, at the same time or shortly after, they are also obliged to report the data from the invoices to the tax authorities. So also under this model, the tax authorities have a view into the taxpayers' transaction in real time. So let's have a look in detail into the post-audit model. So this is the standard situation. We've got a buyer that is placing an order to the supplier. Supplier is delivering goods or service to the customer. After that, he's issuing invoice. And invoice is sent directly to the customer in the format that is either electronic or still is in some countries still on paper form. After that, both the supplier and customer are obliged to report the data of the transaction to the tax authorities. It differs country by country. In some countries, it's standard audit file is already a common system of VAT reporting. So by this, the tax authorities will get information about the transactions of the taxpayer post fact with a delay, either monthly, quarterly, in some countries even annually. So this is not a perfect solution. As we see, that's how the European Union ended up with the VAT gap at the level of 134 billion euro. So what's right now, the authorities try to do is implement so-called clearance model. So we've got here the same situation. The customer is placing order to the supplier is supplying service, delivering goods. However, the invoice in this under this model is sent to the government, usually to the portal that is maintained by the governments. The tax authorities are clearing the invoice, validating it, whether it's issued according to the the required format. Usually, the invoice is assigned with the unique identification number. Afterwards, it is sent to the customer. Of course, the distribution model varies country by country. In some of the countries, the government is outsourcing the validation process to the certified agent. And let's have a look on the status of implementation of invoices worldwide. Although Europe was one of the first countries to introduce digital reporting, when it comes to the e-invoices, the pioneer was Chile in Latin America. In 2003, Chile already introduced e-invoicing. A lot of Latin America's countries followed. Right now, Brazil, Mexico are considered as global leader in e-invoicing. Mexico introduces as an obligation to 100% of transactions in 2014. Effect was really surprising. It was in the first quarter, the increase in tax revenue was estimated at the level of 34%. So not surprisingly, more and more countries are following this lead. We've got right now Asia and Africa that are also shifting towards the e-invoicing. Singapore in Asia was the first country to introduce it. However, it's right now many more in the Asian region that is already using obligatory invoicing. It's South Korea, India, Taiwan, Japan. That's only a few examples. This year also Australia moved towards the clearance model. It introduced the mandatory invoicing in Commonwealth for Commonwealth agencies. Right now is looking for options to introduce it to B2B channel. Having a closer look at the European market, the first country to introduce mandatory e-invoicing in B2B channel was Italy. So one of these countries that has the biggest VAT gap. The effect was very good. The increase in the VAT revenue was estimated by Italian tax authorities at the level of 2 billion euro. So not surprisingly, other European countries are following this suit. We've got Serbia, Romania that will join mandatory B2B invoicing in 2003 already. Then in 2024, Poland, Spain, Belgium are also implementing obligatory invoicing. So we can clearly say that this is already a global trend, and taxpayers, especially those doing business globally, will have a major challenge to adjust to this new requirement. It is estimated by the 2030, this will be a common way of invoicing. So let's have a closer look on the upcoming deadlines. Within the 3 years, their taxpayer will have a lot to do. We've got several countries that are going to introduce invoicing in B2G. Firstly, Luxembourg, Belgium are one of these countries that are doing it gradually within 2022 to 2023. Then we've got, as mentioned already, a few countries that introduce obligatory invoicing for B2B channel. Also, gradually, this will be done by France and Belgium and Spain, firstly starting from large businesses, then covering also within the next year middle-sized companies and small enterprises. And finally, Poland, already in 2022, introduced voluntary B2B invoicing, and it is planned that in 2024 it will become an obligation. So thank you so much for this introduction. And now I'm gonna give a floor to my colleague from Comarch that will explain in more details how the invoicing models will work in the selected European countries. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. So in this part, I would like to say a little bit more about some specific countries, namely Poland, France, Belgium, and Romania. However, before we dive deeper into these countries, I would just like to emphasize that, as already mentioned, we can observe a global trend. We can observe more and more countries switching to from the post-audit model to the clearance model, and we are not able to cover all of these countries today. So I strongly encourage you to write a question regarding any of a country that interests you, and we would be very happy to answer you any question you have today or after the webinar. So yeah, and before we start with Poland and then France, we first have to understand the difference between the so-called structured and unstructured formats. So when we talk about the clearance model, we will deal with the so-called structured formats of documents. And what does it mean? What's the difference from the unstructured ones? When we look at the unstructured, these are usually PDFs or Word documents, which are electronic documents. However, they are not machine readable. So structured formats like iDocs, XMLs, UBS, there are really plenty of structured formats depending on industry, depending on the country. There will be various structured formats. So these are so-called machine readable formats, so that a computer can read them, and with the use of these structured formats we can automate our processes better and digitize our businesses. So I will explain it better on the example of the Polish XML. So on the left hand side you can see a known look of the invoice that you probably know in a PDF form. On the right hand side you can see part of the XML schema of the XML of the Polish invoice, which will be obligatory in the future. So you can see some parts of the PDF here on the left hand side, and on the right hand side, which corresponds to some specific field in the invoice, right? So yeah, this is just an example of the Polish XML, but keep in mind that there are various formats. For each country there will be a different one. Even XMLs can differ between each other. So yeah, this is important to remember. Okay, so let's analyze Poland a little bit. Here are some main points when it comes to Poland. So, as already mentioned, the obligation will come into force in January 2024. However, we have already now the voluntary phase. So, if you want already to start sending invoices in the KSF XML format, you can already do it, and we can support you in that. The platform through which the invoices will go is the Krajowy System e-Faktur, KSF in short. So each and every invoice will have to go through this platform, right? So yeah, this will be a clearance model. So yeah, since 2024, all businesses will be obliged to send and receive their invoices through this platform. Again, when it comes to the dates, actually, right now we are in the voluntary phase, and a lot of our clients have already decided to start sending invoices through the KSF already now in the voluntary phase, because they want to prepare better for the obligation in 2024. And actually, why should you consider switching from the traditional model to the clearance model already now? There are many reasons to do so, but some of them are that it's you should already now analyze the schema of the structure of the Polish e-invoice. Some of the fields which are in the schema are not obligatory by the KSF. So you can send, for example, an e-invoice to the KSF without the order number. And I suppose that some of you, or most most companies require this order number in their invoice, and require their business partners to include this number on the invoice. The KSF doesn't require it, so there is a field that corresponds to the order number. However, your business partners are not obliged to write it. So now it's a good time to already analyze the structure and the schema of the invoice, and decide and communicate with your business partners what you have to focus on, right? How you can already now prepare for this change, and what you should consider when it comes not only in terms of the invoice, but also in terms of the technical preparation for the integration, right? You have to analyze, can I integrate myself with the KSF, or do I need a EDI provider for that? Can I do it myself, or should I outsource this? So now is the best time to start this analysis internally in your company, as well as with your business partners. How it will look like, how will the invoice get to the KSF? I suppose you can be pretty confused with this slide here, because you can see a lot of abbreviations, which maybe some of you are not familiar with. Actually, you don't have to worry about this, because some of that we will cover for you. So maybe let's go step by step. On one hand side, we have the sender who is generating the invoice. The invoice can be generated directly from your ERP system, and it doesn't matter what ERP system you're using, or any kind of IT system. We can do the integration with you regardless of your system, right? So you will actually create your invoice as usually in your system, and through the integration with our Comarch EDI platform, we will receive the invoices for you, and transform them. We call it mapping. We will map them into the necessary KSF XML format. Okay, so you actually don't have to worry about changing your invoice already to the KSF XML, as you can send it to us in an IDoc, in another XML, in an EDFACT, doesn't matter. We translate this invoice for you into the KSF XML format and send it to the KSF. We are already integrated with the KSF through API, so you also don't have to worry about this integration. You don't have to think about the API of the KSF, as we have it already. And then when the invoice finally gets to the KSF, it's validated here, and the KSF assigns the invoice a so-called KSF number. I will talk a little bit about that on the next slide. However, yeah, I would like to point out that here on our level, Comarch can do not only the translation for you, but also some validation. So you have to also remember that the KSF will not validate whether the amounts of the VAT, for example, are correct. They will only check if all the necessary fields from the e-invoice which they require are there. Okay, so we, on the other hand, we can do some additional validation for you. We can make some business validations. We can check for errors. So yeah, so this is the advantage. So yeah. In addition, we can also archive your invoices and track them in our so-called tracking module, where we can monitor the transmission of the invoice. Finally, the recipient can get the invoice either directly from KSF, or we can send the invoice to your recipient through an additional channel. Why is it important? Because, for example, this is just one example of many, the KSF will not accept any attachments to the invoice. I suppose in your business, you usually send your invoice together with an attachment to your recipient. So this will not be possible through the KSF. We, on the other hand, we can send this attachment for you in a separate channel. So yeah, these are more or less the basics when it comes to the general flow of the invoice. When it comes to the details, I would be very happy to explain you a little bit more after the webinar if you like. And now let's see what is the KSF number. The KSF number is a special number which the KSF assigns to your invoice after it validates it. So before the invoice gets to the KSF, we actually don't talk about an invoice, but a draft of an invoice. Okay, so only after receiving this invoice, only after validating by KSF, we talk about an invoice. And this number will be important when you want to, for example, generate a correction invoice. If you want to, if there's any error on your invoice and you will require to generate a correction invoice, this number will be necessary. So we can also support you with that, to store this number so that it doesn't get lost, so that you are able to generate these invoices. Okay, here are some disadvantages listed, just a selection, and how we can support you with that. So yeah, one limitation is that you need to adjust to the KSF XML format, right? So you will not be able to, like, PDF invoices will not exist anymore. Every single invoice in Poland will have to be sent to the KSF, and in order to be accepted by the KSF, it needs to be in the XML format. So you have to, yeah, like, think about it. And I assume that it may be difficult for your business, so we can support you in that. We can actually obtain the invoice in any format from you and transform it into the necessary KSF XML format. Then you, as already mentioned, you have to think also about the integration with the KSF. You have to think, do I want to do it myself, and do I want to analyze any changes in the API and any changes in the requirements that the KSF will have? Do I want to do it myself, or do I want to have a provider who will do it for me? So yeah, so we are constantly adapting the integration to KSF according to any changes and versions. So you don't have to worry about it if you do it for a provider. Another limitation, which is really important, is that you actually don't have any possibility to check for some errors. Sometimes KSF may not accept your invoice, and you will never find out why. So here's also where we can support you. We can track all the invoice flow, and we can tell you where was the invoice. Also, imagine a situation in which you send like a package of invoices, like hundreds of invoices at once, and only one invoice may contain just one little error, like a wrong VAT amount or a wrong tax ID number. The KSF will just not accept this invoice, and you have to think about where the error is. Comarch can do it for you. Comarch can find you this error so that the process is smoother. You cannot send attachments as mentioned already. And in case of any interruptions, you have to see it all the time. Like you have to control any interruptions, any changes all the time. So this you don't have to do if you do it through a provider. And also validations, as mentioned already, we can do extra validations for you. Okay, so this is all when it comes to Poland. There are many more details when it comes to the new requirements set by KSF, and so I encourage you to ask questions, and we will try to answer them after the webinar on our Q&A session. Now let's talk a little bit about France. Here we will have a completely different model. In a minute, I will show you how the model will look like. However, just keep in mind the dates. So 2024, it will be you will be obliged to send invoices when you are a large company, and then in the following years, smaller companies will be also obliged to send. And in 2024, every single company in France will be obliged to receive invoices. All of that will be in the invoices will be in a different format in Factor X. It's a different format than in Poland, and through a different platform, Chorus Pro. An important aspect in the French model is that it's the so-called Y model. I will explain you how it looks like in a minute. However, this certified dematerialization platform partner, in short PDP, is a really important part in this model. And also in France, we will have the e-reporting obligation. Let's have a look at the Y model. But before, just once again, the dates. Keep in mind that in 2024, you will be required to receive invoices in France. And if you are a large company, we will have to issue them. And then 2025, 2026. Okay, so the Y model, how is it different from the Polish model or from the Italian model? The Polish model is based on the Italian model, the so-called V model. In France, we have another model in which invoices don't necessarily have to go through the national platform, but can go through a provider like a certified PDP provider. So Comarch is in the process of becoming a certified registered PDP provider. So you will be able to send your invoices as you used to do it in the past with your business partners. You will not have to adjust to the Chorus Pro. So we can transfer you the invoices through you can send the invoices through a PDP, and your recipients can receive them not necessarily from the Chorus Pro, and we will only send some invoice data to the Chorus Pro. Okay, there are also other kinds of providers called dematerializing operators who are not able to send the invoices directly to your recipients. They will have to do it through Chorus Pro. So this is the main difference, that this is a more flexible model for and more business friendly. It's a little bit different from the Polish one. So you have to also keep in mind that clearance is not only the same in every country. Every country has its own clearance models, and you have to consider it. In France, we will also have the e-reporting obligation. I wouldn't like to dive deeper into this topic as we have limited time today. So I encourage you to ask questions and I would be very happy to explain you more about it in our Q&A session maybe, or after the webinar. So now I'll pass to my colleague Rafał.
Thank you, Kasia, for this interesting take on the developments in France and in Poland. Obviously, those countries are currently in the spotlight, and given the magnitude of the changes, probably rightly so. But there was also another very interesting development in the recent months in Romania, where the local Ministry of Finance used kind of a backdoor to introduce a partial e-invoicing mandate as well, in a way similar to the Polish one. So in September 21, the first draft on implementing invoicing via the national system called ROE Factura was released, and soon a pilot program was initiated. And later that year, an emergency ordinance was issued, which provided more information on the planned B2G invoicing system and set a fixed date for it, for taxpayers to be required to issue invoices through the new system on a mandatory basis. However, recognizing an opportunity to reduce the VAT gap, the authorities extended the planned mandate for B2B suppliers of high-risk fiscal products as well. So for now, e-invoicing is only mandatory in certain cases when it comes to B2B transactions. However, the use of the ROE Factura system is expected to be extended to cover all transactions in 2023, maybe a bit later. So the authorities went even further in order to minimize the VAT gap. Legislation has been introduced to impose similar obligations for issuing dispatch advices, which is probably at least as challenging for the taxpayers and also connected to some heavy penalties in case of non-compliance as of October, which is only in a few weeks. So if you're doing any kind of business in Romania, please keep that in mind and take a closer look if you're affected. In order to use both ROE Transport and ROE Factura, taxpayers must be registered in the virtual private space, which is the local tax portal. After accessing the virtual private space using a qualified electronic signature of an authorized employee of the company, a client ID and a client secret can be issued. This is necessary to generate two kinds of tokens, an authorization token and a refresh token, which is then used by service providers as Comarch to access the API in the name of the taxpayer and automate the connection to both platforms, to ROE Factura and ROE Transport. So unlike in Poland, where the token generation needs to be is handled within the ministries, can be handled within the ministries app, the token generation here needs to be handled externally using a separate API, since the virtual private space does not provide the functionality within the system itself. The invoice transmission is ideally done using the established API connection. If the transmitted electronic invoice complies with the required structure, the electronic signature of the Ministry of Finance is applied. This certifies its receipt in the national system. And if the transmitted invoice does not meet the structure requirements, an error message is sent back respectively. Actually, for both outbound and inbound flow, a zip container which includes the XML file and the electronic signature can be downloaded. And this is then considered to be the original invoice. And the changes being introduced in Romania set a precedent in terms of speed of the rollout, which led to the fact that many taxpayers were unable to meet the requirements on time and still probably are. And saying this, I would like to move on to another country where I expect a much calmer and taxpayer-friendly approach than in Romania. In Belgium, as well as in other European countries, plans for introducing a B2B invoicing mandate were already announced quite some time ago. But it is remarkable that Belgium actually starts with B2G invoicing, which actually is the way to go. It is, as it should be, It is a lower volume, easier to introduce from a legal perspective, as no EU derogation decision is required. And the framework is already in place and in use for quite some time. So in public procurement, those solutions are already well established in most European countries, in most EU countries. And well, the B2G mandate in Belgium will come into life for contracts above 214,000 euros as of October, since the legislation was published in the end of March and gave the invoice issuer 6 months to comply. So the mandate will be gradually extended, which again is a reasonable approach, and it will cover invoices above the threshold of 30,000 euros as of April, and all B2G transactions in the end of next year. So within the budget plan statement 2022, the Belgian ministry had also confirmed on rolling out a B2B invoicing mandate in the future. Initial plans to launch it in July 2023 have been delayed already, and the mandate is expected to be implemented gradually starting in July 2024 with large taxpayers. However, Belgium is unlikely to see a classic CTC model at the beginning at first. The solution will probably be based on the four-corner PEPL network, and maybe later a fifth or even a sixth corner, depending how we interpret things and how we look at the tax administration itself, will be added if the four-corner mandate won't have the expected impact with regard to mindering the VAT gap. A similar approach is also heavily lobbied by our colleagues within the European Service Provider Association. And as Comarch is already a well-established PEPL access point, it is, of course, very interesting for us to see how this will develop. Last but not least, we also have a very interesting development within the EU itself. But first, let's take a wider look at the so-called digital reporting requirements already introduced a bit by our colleagues from KPMG. We're mainly talking about e-invoicing today, but it's definitely worth mentioning that this is not the only way tax administration can actually fight the VAT gap, as the so-called DRRs were very well defined in the context of the EU's VAT in the Digital Age study, which defined them as an obligation for VAT taxable persons to periodically or continuously submit data in a digital way. So the VAT directive actually allows member states to introduce various types of DRRs. So we can have VAT listings, we can have SAFTs, we can have real-time reporting, as for example in Hungary, and we can have e-invoicing. But this is not everything. I already mentioned that we do have transport-related documents as well. And this can also be a trend for the future, as it is a great tool to fight the VAT gap as well. The newest example, of course, is the road transport mandate in Romania. So users in scope of the new legislations are obliged to make available to the road transport control the UIT code related to the transported goods. And to get this UIT code, this so-called UIT code, the dispatch advice has to be sent to the road transport system first. So it's essentially a dispatch advice clearance model. The question is, what can we expect next? And there is obviously a lot of planning across most EU countries going on after Italy paved the way successfully, but most countries, such as Germany and Spain, are waiting. And why are they doing that? The reason is quite simple, also already mentioned by our colleagues. They wait for the EU. They want to know what the EU will come up with. And the VAT in the digital age study, which was all about how data should be collected, was already published and made very clear that the EU will have 4 options to choose from in terms of their actions. One would be doing nothing. The second one would be removing the derogation requirement. The third one would be keeping data with the taxpayer. And finally, the fourth one would be harmonize the system. And here we have 2 options. One would be partial harmonization. The second one would be full harmonization. And well, rumor has it that the EU will go with partial harmonization of the invoicing landscape, probably simply because some countries already invested in their solutions. So full harmonization would be super hard to enforce. This means that probably only EU intra-community live reporting with member states left to introduce their own system will be introduced. One might say, of course, that the EU came too late to the party, to the e-invoicing party, and one might say that it is still possible to harmonize things and at least prevent further chaos within the invoicing landscape. Probably both statements are correct. Of course, it would be better to take action when the so-called public procurement directive was issued somewhere around 10 years ago, or even enforce a more harmonized VAT system across the EU back in 2006 by introducing a different VAT regulation. But all in all, it's also true that no action would probably be the worst solution for taxpayers. So, well, to sum up, we are indeed very curious how this will pan out within the next years. But one thing is certain, there are going to be a lot of challenging changes coming in the next years. So let's move on to the third part of the presentation. Kasia?
Yes,
It's
so,
me.
yeah.
I'm sorry, I have not unmuted myself. Okay, so let's go to challenges and opportunities related to e-invoicing. So when I speak with my clients about mandatory invoicing that is going to happen in Poland, everyone is frightened, everyone is scared of this new obligation. But it is worth mentioning that with this new obligation, not only challenges come, but also opportunities. And when we speak about the e-invoicing, first opportunity is that we are going actually to digitize and automate our invoicing processes. If we currently issue paper invoices, if we issue electronic invoices, for example, a PDF attachment to an email, there is always a manual interaction of an employee that needs to produce those invoices. With mandatory e-invoicing, definitely the process is going to get automated and digitized. So if we have it automated and digitized, then definitely we're talking about the reduction of costs of the invoice processing. Next opportunity is that currently we need to discuss with our customers what type of invoice, in what form they want to receive. Some of them want to receive them in paper, some of them in EDI, the others as an attachment to an email, as I mentioned. With mandatory invoicing, only one form of invoice in one scheme with all the same elements will be acceptable. So we'll not have negotiations with our customers and discussions about what type of invoice they want to receive from us. When we receive invoices, paper invoices or electronic invoices, and when we have to take data from those invoices and input them into our ERP, there is always a risk of manual errors. With electronic invoices, where we have interfaces and where we have systems integrated with platform for e-invoicing, such manual errors will no longer happen. And of course, with reduction of paper invoices, we will be more eco-friendly. So this can be seen as opportunities related to introduction of mandatory invoicing. As comes to challenges, as we mentioned in the beginning, unfortunately, different countries introduce different digital reporting obligations. So the system is not harmonized, and the European Commission right now is working on it to harmonize the solution, whether to go in full harmonization or partial harmonization. But for the time being, every country has its own way of e-invoicing. This means that you have to be alert. You have to check country by country what are the requirements, what are the standards. Of course, you have to also know very well your invoicing processes within the company, because if it happens that you have, I don't know, 5-6 billion systems, it may be the moment that you need to optimize the invoicing processes, and maybe one or two systems would be still feasible to manage your invoicing processes, because it's definitely easier to integrate those systems than 5-6 systems with, for example, in Poland, platform of the Ministry of Finance. E-invoicing project is a huge event. It's going to touch every organization, which has to first secure a budget for this project, secure a team of people. And it's not only IT people, it's not only a technology project, but tax people, accounting people, and also, I don't know, every person that has anything to say what's on the invoices. When we carry out the workshop with our clients, we have a big audience. We have lots of attendees, starting from IT, tax, legal departments, ending at logistics. So this is something which has to be taken care of: the budget, the people, and time. You, of course, have to choose a solution which will work for you, a tool. If you are able to build it in your own ERP, of course, go ahead. But many companies cannot do it in their ERP. They need to look for a solution for invoicing, for a standalone tool that will just get integrated with the platform for invoicing. Last but not least, the tax authorities are going to receive your data in real time. So you need to assure that you have the best quality of data that you transfer to the tax authorities. Currently, for example, in Poland, where we have a standard audit file, we submitted until 25th day of the following month. This means that after the month closure, there is still time to amend all the errors, to issue credit notes, debit notes, to correct the data. With mandatory invoicing in Poland, where the tax authorities are going to receive the data almost in a real time, it's not going to be possible. So if they spot, and they are going to have their verification algorithms, that there is something wrong with the data, they can, of course, contact you. They can start an audit and potentially impose fines and penalties. So these are the opportunities and challenges of e-invoicing.
And I would only just like to add that, or maybe summarize that, the clearance models in various countries, it's not a question of whether it will come. It's more about when it will apply in many countries. So we can observe this trend. So we have to prepare our business for the change and adopt our processes already now. And when we talk about it, we don't only talk about invoicing, we also talk about e-reporting, e-transport. So it's also other kinds of electronic documents or e-documents that we will have to be that we will be obliged to exchange. Also, yeah, when we talk about challenges, we have to consider that we have various business models, various ERP systems, various IT systems in our companies. So we have to analyze it. We have to be prepared for it so that we can obtain process optimization, cost reduction, and automatization. These are only some of the advantages when it comes to switching to invoicing and electronic data interchange in general.
All right, so with e-invoicing, it is important to have a good plan. And so you need to prepare your global strategy of preparing for e-invoicing. So first of all, you need to monitor of the developments of the given countries. So let's see how it looks, for example, in Poland. We have the voluntary invoicing started in January 2022, and it was supposed to become obligatory in 2023. However, in the beginning, it was supposed to be January, later on April. Then there were rumors that it's going to be July. In the end, it's not going to happen before January 2024. So you need to check it in the beginning, and later on, you need to keep monitoring how the process looks like, because the timeline, the deadlines for implementation, it changes. Later on, the data governance. You need to have the best data possible. You need to have clean data stored that will allow you to meet the requirements of e-invoice schema in the given country. Later on, the next element of your global strategy should be the ERP system readiness verification. So if you have any gaps in your data, you need to close them before e-invoicing becomes mandatory. Otherwise, you can be subject of fines or restrictions. The next element of your strategy is to decide whether you intend to introduce a global solution or rather a local solution. And last but not least, legal and tax analysis. In every country, as I mentioned, such an analysis should be performed. It is not only an IT project, technology project, but lots of information needs to be interpreted and implemented correctly from the tax and legal perspective. So how can KPMG assist you with e-invoicing? For example, we can provide you with the tax and legal updates per country with all the requirements for e-invoices. We assist our clients with mapping processes. So we sit down in a workshop, we take an invoice, we take general invoice which we issued currently, we take e-invoice schema, and we compare those documents, and we see where are the gaps and try to close. We often also help with interpretation of data, because, for example, in Poland, the e-invoice schema is quite a lengthy document, has a lot of fields. Some fields are mandatory, some fields are optional, some fields are facultative. So to decide whether this given field should be filled in and with what data, you need to have a good tax knowledge. So we help you with this. Also, if you have many billing systems, we help you to optimize your invoicing processes and maybe concentrate on one or two invoicing solutions. Please remember also that e-invoicing is not only about exchange of billing documents between supplier and customer, it also has an effect on tax reporting. So, for example, in Poland, e-invoice is going to be considered as issued by the supplier when it is transferred, when it is sent to the platform of Ministry of Finance. So not the moment you generate the invoice in your ERP, but the moment it is sent to the platform of the Ministry of Finance. So if there is a time gap between those moments, it will have influence on the moment of reporting this document. For example, if this is a document with a special tax point, depending on the moment the invoice was issued, then it should be also captured. It can have influence on your foreign exchange rate, which you apply. So these are all important elements which will influence your VAT reporting. What else? Of course, we can assist you. I can summarize that we can assist you with every tax and legal aspect of the invoicing process which you require.
Okay, yeah, so maybe to sum up, as mentioned, in order to adapt to these new changes which are coming, it's important to have a good partner, an experienced partner who has already knowledge and experience in these fields. So yeah, we can support you in this process. We have already over 20 years of experience when it comes to electronic data interchange, so it doesn't only consider invoices but also other kinds of documents. So we are happy to assist you in that, and also an important aspect if you are a global company which is working on various in various countries, in various industries. It's important to follow all the changes in these various countries and industries. So and be prepared. So in order to do it, it's good to have a very reliable partner who is doing it for you, actually, who is tracking these changes. Okay, so I think this is all from our side. So maybe I will pass to Veronika.
Okay, thank you all for a big dose of expert information. We can clearly see that the trend of shifting from the post-audit model to clearance is growing, and that it should be kept in mind by all companies. As we are coming to the end of our webinar, let me quickly ask a few questions from the chat. And as I've already mentioned, if we won't manage to answer all of them, we will do it after the webinar. Okay, so first question, when should we start preparation of invoicing, and how long approximately does it take to implement the invoicing solution?
All right, so maybe I will cover this one. I can speak about Poland. So if we are talking about Polish mandatory invoicing, we should start right now. This is the best moment. We should start preparation for the mandatory invoicing, which is going to happen potentially in January 2024. And with respect to timing, our experience shows that to implement the proper solution adjusted to your organization, you need around 4-6 months per country to have it done properly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for the answer. The second question. I work for a company that operates globally. How do I implement invoicing when there are different requirements in different countries?
So maybe I will answer this question. So yeah, as we have seen in the presentation, every single country has actually their own requirements, and every clearance model looks a little bit different, and right now it's changing a lot all around the globe, in fact. So it's different. It's difficult to follow all these changes permanently, and it's important to have someone who can do it for us. So yeah, we can, as an EDI provider, we can support you in that. We are working with companies who do business globally in various countries. So we have to make sure that they can send and receive invoices and other kind of documents, and regardless of the region. So it's important to have a strong partner in that sense, and also to take advantage of economies of scale, because if we have a lot of different providers in many countries, it's hard to control it all. So it's good to have one provider who can support you in many different regions and countries.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Katarzyna, for this answer. Okay, so third question quickly. Will mandatory invoicing in Poland cover also Polish branches of foreign companies? Will it apply only to B2B or also to B2C invoices?
So let me answer for this question. This is actually a very good question, but unfortunately at this stage there's no clear answer, because the Polish tax authorities, they haven't yet released that the draft bill of the regulation for the period when the invoices become mandatory in Poland. We have some information regarding the scope of the taxpayers that will be covered by mandatory invoicing based on the derogation obtained by Poland. So the scope of the taxpayers indicated in the derogation decision is limited to the companies established in Poland. So what we know for sure now is that the foreign taxpayers that are only VAT registered in Poland will be excluded from this obligation. However, we do not know whether the fixed establishment of foreign companies, including also branches, will be covered by the obligatory invoicing. Having analyzed the wording of the decision, we are of the opinion that it should not apply to the fixed establishment of foreign companies. However, we see that the Italy, that had the same wording of the English version of the decision, actually interpreted broadly and also made it obligatory for fixed establishment of foreign companies. So we cannot exclude that Poland will go the same way, as that Polish system is based on the Italian one. And actually the same case is with B2C. We don't know yet, as there is no draft bill of the regulation introduced. Derogation decision allows for this, right? So the tax authorities, if they want, they can introduce it. Right now, the invoice structure that is also valid in the voluntary period also allows for issuance invoices for consumers. But what will be at the end, whether eventually the tax authorities make it also obligatory for B2C business, we'll see once the draft bill of the regulation is released.
Thank you very much for this answer. Okay, as we are running out of time, maybe I will ask the last question from the chat. Some of my business partners are small suppliers who can't receive structured invoices. How can I send the invoices to them?
Maybe I can answer. So yeah, indeed, when it comes to small companies which do not have ERP systems, maybe, or are not so technologically developed, one of the possible solutions would be a web EDI solution. This is a online portal on which small companies can generate and receive invoices. It looks like a email box, and actually you can have a look on it, how it looks like on our website. You can find a demo of our web EDI, when you can click yourself and have a look how it works and how you can generate invoices online, right? So this is only one option, but there are also many other options that we can support you in.
Okay, great. We still have some questions on our chat, but as I've mentioned, we will answer them after this webinar. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much to our guests and our speakers from Comarch as well. And see you at the next webinar. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you
bye.
very much.
Thank you
Bye.
very much, and bye.